Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos and welcome to my guide to Temple of Sethraliss. This is footage from a plus 18 that my group did, but I'm actually starting a little bit early because there's some stuff to explain about how we're starting this. So first off, we're killing some trash here so we can get our archive stacks up to 20, and then we're about to start the timer here, but before the key goes in, we use Metamorphosis, Incarnation, and my Shroud of Concealment. And those are all abilities that you can carry through into the start of the keystone, and that makes this skip that we're about to do easier because instead of Shroud lasting 15 seconds, by using a pre-Shroud you can get it up to 18, 19 seconds, and that makes this skip a lot easier. Then you just click Shroud again when the old one is about to expire here, because the cooldown gets reset. This mob needs to get sapped, the other ones don't need to get distracted back there, and then you need to sap this stealth mob and distract the other ones away to the side, and the rest of your group can walk through without pulling anything. You can see Shroud ending just about now, so it's possible to do it without the pre-Shroud, but it's a lot more finicky, and I would not recommend it. I would recommend getting a pre-Shroud if at all possible, to make it a lot safer. You see I've got a weak aura here that puts that poison icon on me. That's an ability from the Marksman. The Marksman do this Viper Sting, which is a poison on players, but it doesn't actually do anything unless you move with the ability, and then if you move you get slept for 5 seconds. Both the initial and the sleep are poison effects, and they can both be dispelled, but it's better to just not move and then you don't have to worry about it. So I have that weak aura that it actually plays a sound and it goes up on my screen and it yells at me basically to not move while I have the poison on me, which is good because otherwise I move and get slept and then I have to get dispelled, and that's bad. So we're starting off by just pulling some trash from the side here, and then we're going to fight the boss immediately after this. The Shrouded Fang, this one patrols all the way through the boss room. You really want to make sure you grab it, but luckily it has a little Crowlusk hatchling pet that is visible and is not stealthed, so you can see where it is by using that, even if you don't have a Demon Hunter for Spectral Sight. And now we're going to fight this boss. This boss is one of the hard ones on Tyrannical. There are actually 2 hard bosses in this place on Tyrannical. Particularly this week, the third boss this is actually pre-nerf. The third boss, this is the world first 18 Tyrannical completed by anybody, but the third boss is really difficult, and that's part of why it was nerfed, and part of why we were the first group to be able to kill it, because we spent a lot of time working on our strat for that one. So what's going on here is when you start the fight, about 3 seconds into the start of the fight, the caster there, Aspix, will get a lightning shield on himself, and then for the rest of the fight that lightning shield is going to switch between the 2 mobs, and I actually used my first 2 globals on Aspix because you only get punished for hitting the mob with lightning shield once it's up, but you don't get punished for dots that are already active. So I like to put 2 big dots on that target that's about to get lightning shielded, and then I like to make sure that I refresh my dots right before the lightning shield switches to the other target. And then the abilities that are going on here, right now the caster is the active mob, and the Adderus, the melee warrior person, is the inactive mob. So Adderus is the one with lightning shield active on him, and the way it works is that the inactive mob slowly builds up energy. At 50 energy they do one ability, and at 100 energy they do another ability. For Adderus, at 50 energy it teleports to the nearest person to it and does a swirly AoE on them, but that's not too big of a problem. You see how there I actually got ticked by lightning shield because I'm bad. And at 100 energy, Adderus, when is non-active, does the dash at people, so you just need to move away from where you are because it targets where people were at the start of the cast. Whereas Aspix, at 50 energy, fires off Conduction, which is a big damage and AoE on somebody, but luckily it can be cloaked, which is what I'm doing there. And then at 100 energy, Aspix does big damage to everybody in the raid, and that is what's about to come out here. It's this big circle thing, and then the lightning shield switches, that animation goes on for a couple seconds, and then the ability switches. You need to really be careful to not nuke yourself with lightning shield, because if you use offensive attacks on whoever has lightning shield, you're going to die very quickly. In fact, our Moonkin famously once used a melee attack to kill himself on the Adderus when it was active with the lightning shield, so that's embarrassing for him, and we're trying to never let him forget about it, and that's part of why I'm telling all of you about it. So now it's just dodge time. We're dodging toward the middle. Again, the main thing with the dodge there is to make sure you aren't where you were, because it locks in your positions and then charges towards where those were. And also if you are between where it charges, you're also going to be in trouble. So you want to be kind of tightly grouped to make sure that the total charges cover less of the room, and therefore there's less danger zone, and you make sure you move to nowhere that would be remotely close to being in a line between where 2 people were before. Once again, I can get Conduction, go out of the group, use Feint here to reduce the damage on me. One thing that became true when we were doing this more afterwards is that I changed my talents around a little bit. I actually switched from Toxic Blade to Exsanguinate, which is definitely correct, and I switched from Cheat Death to Elusiveness, mostly for the third boss, but it would also help here on some of the abilities that target people. Not the, I think the Conduction and the big AoE zappy thing are AoE abilities, so they actually are affected by Feint without Elusiveness, but the other single target stuff I could mitigate with Elusiveness, which would be cool. That being said, I think Cheat Death is still better for this fight. The only reason you might want Elusiveness is for that third boss fight. Okay, I nearly got myself severed there, but luckily I did not. And once again, we're just switching back and forth here. making sure to not DPS whatever target is active with Lightning Shield, and when one of these two dies, Lightning Shield will fall off the other person, but it takes a little while to do that, so that's something that we always make sure we do, is we don't switch to the target immediately here, because you can see still got Lightning Shield, still got Lightning Shield, still got Lightning Shield. Finally, 5 seconds later, the Lightning Shield falls off, and we can DPS Asphyx and finish the fight. But that's what people have killed themselves many times, attacking the target with Lightning Shield there. This fight is really difficult if your group is not very well coordinated, and if your group is not, like, I mean, the Lightning Shield just kills you so quickly, it's so punishing that this is where a lot of pugs fall apart in this place, and this is part of why this dungeon is run so infrequently by pugs, is because that fight is particularly hard. See, I was a little scared there of getting hit by a falling rock, but luckily I was out of range there. And now we're going to fight this scaled Crowlusk Rider, which has a frontal cone breath that needs to be, it faces at the tank, so you just need to face that away from people. And then it also does a frontal cleave, which is smaller, but also you need to just not be on top of the tank. And then it does electrified scales, which is actually a purgeable effect. You see there, one of the breaths actually got sent down the way we just came and hit everybody, which is a little bad. But luckily it's Tyrannical week, so the trash is not as lethal as normal. And yeah, then you need to purge the electrified scales off of the Crowlusk Riders. When they get low enough, they're actually going to they get off of their Crowlusk and they become stunnable, which makes them a lot easier to deal with when they're on the ground like that. And the other mob that needs to die here is the Sand-Crusted Striker, which does these annoying dust clouds that stops things from inside from being hit, basically. It makes them dodge almost all the attacks on them. So we also usually try to focus those. The Venomous Ophidians, by contrast, don't do much of anything, so you don't need to worry about them. And there's also a Marksman up there at the top that's being just ringed down so that we can hit it more easily and kill it with the rest of the stuff here. Marksmen just do this power shot, which is frontal. Like they pick a direction and then it's a straight line in that direction and it needs to be dodged. Looks like Zach might have gotten cleaved there. I'm not entirely sure how he died, but I think that's probably what happened. Anyways, the power shot is this frontal. They choose somebody, they shoot a power shot in their direction after a couple seconds. But what's nice about this particular place to fight people is that it actually doesn't have much of a z-axis. It doesn't go very up or down from where they are. So if you're fighting them and they are at a higher or lower elevation than you, you don't even have to worry about dodging the power shots. They'll just go over or under you. And you see here, I'm just distracting that Tamer. The Tamer comes a little close in this patrol here. It's not actually sappable, as you can see there. I tried to sap it, but it's immune to that. But it can be distracted in a good place so that we can skip it because it's not part of our route. Our route just involves this stuff. With this infested pattern, that Marksman is actually part of our route, but it doesn't, even though it's infested, we don't even need to worry too much about it because it's a ranged mob, so it doesn't actually run on top of the other stuff, so we can dot cleave it down with all this other stuff, particularly once that dust cloud disappears. You can see there I'm kidneying the Sand-Crusted Striker because I don't want it to cast another dust cloud. I want it to die before it gets another one off because the dust clouds are really annoying and they make the pull take longer. And now we're just going to kill off this Marksman. You see here I cannot move. I've got the effect on me again, the poison. And there goes a power shot off to the side. Power shot plus not being able to move is a bit of a combo that you need to watch out for. That's something that might be worth calling for a dispel, or you can move and just get slept. And it's fine as long as you dodge the power shots because they do a lot of damage. You see there again, there's a little bit of a grace period, right? I was still moving when that was first applied to me, but there's a bit of a grace period from when it gets applied to when it actually starts taking effect, that if you move, you get slept. And then one thing that also was true there is that I took a Volcanic instead of moving with the sleep effect, which I think is right, but I could use my cloak there to negate both effects. But I think it's the thing about Volcanic is it's not actually that dangerous unless combined with something else. So if you're at full health, you can just eat a Volcano, and it's not a huge deal. You just have to get healed. But with a Disc Priest, you kind of get healed for free if you're not taking any extra damage, because they just have to put an atonement on you, and then whatever they were already doing will heal you for free. So it's not too big of a deal to eat a Volcano under the right circumstances. Now we're doing this room. This room has actually been nerfed since the time of this recording as well. It used to be that these tenders would cast a greater healing potion every 10 seconds or so. Well, that was the cooldown on it, so they could cast it every 10 seconds, and then they would recast if you stunned them. Now it's been changed so that cooldown is only 25 seconds, or is down to 25 seconds, and also they won't recast if they're stunned during the cast. So we're actually, recently we're pulling this room bigger, and we're pulling more stuff at the time because more of our abilities interact with the tender, and we need fewer kicks to stop the greater healing potion. If a greater healing potion ever goes off, it's a big disaster. It basically throws a healing potion on the ground near an enemy mob, and then any enemy mob near that area when the healing potion lands gets splashed for a huge increase in health, like 25% of their health or something. Faithless Tenders also do this drain cast. If that gets off, they will heal for a bunch and get a buff on them, and you need to stop them from casting drain. It's not actually interruptible. You need to stun them or disorient them or use Ring of Peace to stop them from getting to the egg. It's actually, a lot of effects don't actually stop them once they're channeling on an egg, so things like Death Grip and Ring of Peace, they'll just keep channeling the drain sometimes on the eggs, which is really obnoxious. So be on the lookout for that. Make sure that you're using the right kind of abilities to stop them. All right, so now we're looking at the rest of the room here. There are 2 infested on this infested pattern and 5 non-infested, so our options are either 2, 2, 3, or 2 and 5. And that's what we're debating right now, is whether or not we want to pull these 3 tenders with the 2 incubators, or whether we want to make that more pulls. And usually when there's something like this, our tank likes to pull big, but again, because these mobs, the tenders are so bad, if they get even 1 greater healing potion off, it's not worth to pull them with other stuff. We've decided we're just going to pull them by themselves. If we had Bloodlust, I think we would be likely to pull more stuff with this. And also, if we were doing this week, now that they're nerfed and the greater healing potion is less of a threat, we would also be likely to pull bigger here. But yeah, we just want to stop those drains. There's a good Chaos Nova there to stop the drain from going off. You can see Skull is now walking towards to try and drain that egg. Nobody actually has a way to interact with that except for our tank, who uses Leg Sweep. Now we're just pulling in this incubator. We should go grab the other incubator right now as well, and then we'll do the 2 infested afterwards. And that's kind of always the thing you need to be doing when you're looking at rooms, is figuring out how you're going to break up the pulls so that they make sense with the infested pattern. One big mistake to do here would be to pull 4 mobs that are uninfested, and then you just have 1 uninfested mob to deal with, and you can't efficiently pull that with anything. So as I was saying, the good options there were either all 5 non-infested at once, or splitting that up into 2 pulls, and then you definitely need to do both of these infested at the same time, otherwise it's just too inefficient. Incubators, when they're low, they cast Pyrrhic Blast. Once they start that cast, they're not interruptible on it, but you don't even have to worry about it. You just walk away from them and they'll explode when they finish that cast. If you're close to them, you'll take a lot of damage though, so try not to have that happen, that's bad. The incubators also throw Lightning in a Bottle. Lightning in a Bottle is a bit of a weird AoE. It targets on the tank, and it affects an AoE around the tank, but there's no indication of where it is. It just pulses every couple seconds, and when it pulses, there's an indication of where it is. But when it's not pulsing, there's actually no ground indication to know where the unsafe area is. So it's better to interrupt it, but if you can't interrupt it, just get away from wherever the tank was and give it more space than you think you might need, because it does quite a bit of damage. Kahuni killing time now, of course, now that stuff's dead. Would be better if those 2 mobs died a little bit more evenly, but because of Pyrrhic Blast, 1 died before the other. And now you can see the boss has spawned as well. This boss is not one of the harder ones in this place. I think it's probably the easiest boss in this area, but even then, it's still a little deadly. You can see we start over by the entrance of the room, because our goal in phase 1, when there's this Noxious Breath, is we want the Noxious Breaths to not take up too much of the room, because they permanently deny the area that they land in. And with those sorts of area denial effects, we want to leave as much space as possible for ourselves going forward. So we just keep moving in slow movements, and because the breath is targeted on a player, we keep trying to bait it towards where we just came from, towards the area that's already unsafe, towards the area that we don't want to use for the rest of the fight. And then the snake also spits. You can see there, this breath is a little badly baited. That might have been by me, I'm not sure. Even then, as long as it's going toward the outsides of the room rather than the inside, no big deal. One problem with fighting the boss right on the edge of the room is that after the boss burrows, you might get knocked around and killed by the boss. That's actually happened a couple times, famously on stream to a couple different people, and that's a big worry. So recently I like making sure that I'm not standing right where it will become that burrowed thing, because when it charges around, if it touches you, you take quite a bit of damage, you get knocked up. And the problem with that knock up as well is that if you get knocked along the same direction the boss is going, you'll just keep getting knocked and die. So that's what we want to avoid. So now we're in phase 2. There are those adds between phase 1 and phase 2, and now we're in phase 2. Phase 2, there's no breaths, there's just Blinding Sand and Knot of Snakes. Blinding Sand you need to turn away from. Knot of Snakes you can either kill, but you can also stop them from stunning. You can kill them also by just blinding them, or by gouging them, or by imprisoning them, or by paralyzing them, or by stunning them. So pretty much anything works to stop those snakes. You just have to have somebody quickly react to it. It's not a big threat in this phase, because the main problem with it is in phases 1 and 3, you can get green to spawn under you, and then get Knot of Snakes in the green, and you die pretty quick, because that green underneath you deals a lot of damage. Now these adds are different from the ones that are in the first intermission. These adds actually spawn the Dust Clouds, which are really obnoxious, particularly if they ever get under the boss. That's really bad. And as this fight goes longer, you might not see this in lower keystone levels, but now during phase 3, towards the end of phase 3, another set of 4 of those adds is going to spawn, and that's sort of like an enrage to the fight. As the fight, if you take a long time to kill this boss, if it's on a high keystone level, you're going to have to deal with that set of 4 sand-crusted strikers during the actual boss fight here. So once again, the pattern is breath, and then you make sure you're moving so that you don't get. You really need to be moving so that if green spawns under you, you are no longer underneath it when the Knot of Snakes comes out, because if you get stunned in the green, that's a good way to die. That's the only real way that you can die on this fight. And then we're still trying to bait the Noxious Breath. You see we have a bunch of free space here to keep moving the boss to, but now that the boss is so low, we're a little bit less worried, and now if we need to, it's fine to send a breath toward the middle. The main thing is we just wanted to have this space to play with as we get to this point. Now we have 2 Venomous Ophidians and 2 Sand-Crusted Strikers, so that's 2 of the snakes that don't do anything, and 2 of the snakes that do the Dust Clouds. And the Dust Clouds, if they get under the boss, are really brutal. And you can see there we're using Ring of Peace to stop them from actually casting under the boss. Got to make sure these Nada snakes get dealt with here. We actually damaged that one down instead of stunning it or something. That's pretty bad. I should have probably kidneyed that, but I didn't, so that would have been a way to play better. And that's the snake down. Snake, again, easiest boss in this place, does not take very long to kill. That, even on High Tyrannical, was only a 3-minute fight, not a 3.5, or a 7-minute fight like the last fight will be. So now we're just killing a little bit of trash here. This is not a bad infested pattern for this trash. Sometimes there's a really obnoxious infested pattern where, like, the Nimbus in the second pull is infested, and that's, there's not really an easy way to deal with that. You kind of have to pull some infested with non-infested and just deal with the extra damage, or pull it 1-1-1, which is not a good way to do it. But this week you can just pull all 3 at the same time, which is nice. And that's the same. There are 3 total different infested patterns, and it cycles every week between 1, 2, and 3, and it just keeps going in that order, so... this infested pattern is the one that was active during this week, or during the week of the recording. It's also the one that's active during the week that is currently now, and it'll be active again 3 weeks from the time that this video goes out, unless I really mess up my release schedule, which is something that could happen, but hopefully it doesn't. These mobs, the Nimbuses, they cast Accumulate Charge, which is interruptible, and it gives them a damage buff. That buff can also be purged. It can be, the Demon Hunter can purge it, the Priest can purge it, or mages can spell steal it. So you actually want to let the cast go off if you have a mage in your group and let them spell steal it. And now we get to the maze. The maze is a huge problem because we're really, stupid. So we run into the balls all the time. Luckily, we managed to get through on like the 3rd try, which is nice. Although our druid's having a little bit of difficulty there. Luckily, he has Wild Charge to bail him out of actually having to do a mechanic, which is good because he's not a skilled mechanical gamer, and that's an important thing to be able to do. And we use Ring of Peace and Sap there to get that patrol out of the way so that we don't have to worry about pulling it. And now we're going to pull these static charged dervishes, as well as the agitated Nimbus. The dervishes will jump onto the tank and do a big AoE around, well, not a big AoE, but like a 5 or 8 yard AoE or something around the tank. So you need to make sure that you're not on top of the tank, or else you're going to get zapped, and that's bad. And they also just zap random players, which you can't avoid, so don't worry about that zap. One thing that is particularly obnoxious is that the sand-crusted, or the static charged dervishes, as they are actually named, do a weird interaction with both Infested and Sanguine. With Sanguine, they actually drop 5 stacks of Sanguine instead of 1, for no discernible reason. I think it's due to the fact that they kind of, when they die, they become these sparks that in the RP then transform into the boss afterwards, and some problem with how that's coded causes them to drop 5 stacks of Sanguine instead of 1. And then with Infested, they actually don't spawn Gahunis when they die as well. Again, partially because I think that death animation is hard-coded in a weird way. So that's what's going on here. We're just going to kill these 3 static charged dervishes. One thing you can actually do is you can add in the Infested to this pull, because the Infested will just jump onto whoever it has threat on. So you can see there, our druid has actually pulled the Infested dervish, and is just going to make sure that the threat stays on him, and it's going to jump to the druid instead of jumping on the tank, and that way we can just dot cleave it down a little bit during this pull. And it doesn't actually, because the tank doesn't have threat on it, again, the static charge dervishes never move, they just teleport to their threat target. So by keeping that threat target to be our druid, that's going to keep it teleporting over there. However, we've had a little bit of a problem here with the raging. I'm not quite sure what got Zach. It might be some combination of being too close to the tank and getting hit by the AoE part, or he might have just gotten unlucky and getting zapped a bit. See there, that's what happened to me. Is I stood too close to where it was teleporting to. And you can see there, no, it was just electrocutes, not the... electrocute is the ability you can't avoid, so he just got unlucky. They were all raging, and he got electrocuted. Whereas I got lucky by taking the avoidable damage, but at a time it wouldn't kill me. So, and there you can see the Infested died, but no Gahunia spawned. Which is cool. Cool game design. Cool bug, I guess. That one's beneficial, so I like it. Now we're here to the hardest fight in the dungeon, particularly pre-nerf. This has since been nerfed so that the Spires deal 25% less damage, which is a pretty sizable nerf. But at the time, this is really, really hard because the Spires do a bunch of consistent damage, and the way it works is you need to have somebody soaking each Spire, because if that beam touches the boss is just going to AoE one-shot everybody. So you can see we start off with our tank soaking that first Spire. There's going to be 2 Spires active at once, and our order is tank, Demon Hunter, me, Druid. And that's the way we do it. So you see here, I'm going to take my first one here. And what I'm also looking for is an opportunity to double soak, and that actually comes up right now. You can see this other one. I can soak both of these beams, so I'm telling my druid to get away. I'll soak both of these beams, I'll use Cloak of Shadows, and I'm not taking any damage from either of those spires, nor am I gaining any stacks. So that really is a huge ability that you can use to stop damage from going out on the group. I like to use my Cloak of Shadows early when doing this on High Tyrannical because it'll come up towards the end of the fight if I can use it during that first cycle of spires. Now we're just making sure that we're calling out whose job it is to go get the next spire, who's soaking each one. You can see here I end up getting a little bit more stacks because I still got 2 stacks from when my cloak expired on the last one. But that's fine. It's fine to be at 11 stacks. I'm playing cheat death here, so it's fine if I fall low and almost die because I do have cheat death to save me. Nowadays I actually play elusiveness for this fight because the damage pattern is really good for elusiveness. You can just feint right towards the final 5 seconds of your beam, and 30% is a huge amount of damage reduction, and you're not actually in much danger of dying all of a sudden in this fight. You're just in danger of taking high sustained damage that kills you, and that's a great situation for elusiveness. If you're interested in that sort of analysis, I actually have a talent guide to Assassination Rogue that details those sorts of decisions, so if you're looking at how to make that, you might want to check that video out, and it'll be recommended at the end of this video. You might see it in the little notification or the little sidebar that suggests other videos, or you can maybe search for it, check my channel, subscribe or whatever. Those are all good things that I would like you to do, so please do that. Now the boss is at 30%. You see we lusted on pull, which is the optimal way to lust for damage, and that's why we do it there. But the optimal way to lust for healing would be to do it later, but it turns out that the best way to make this fight easier to heal is to just kill it as fast as humanly possible. So that's what we are up to here. We're just doing soaks, and at some point our tank is going to be taking too much damage to soak anymore. That's kind of what happens in this fight, is our tank rolls cooldowns and eventually is out of them, and we'll need as much help as we can get. You can see our druid there is also casting things like Wild Growth and Swift Mends to just take as much of the healing load off of the healer as possible. That's why he's doing a little bit less damage than everybody, but it's important. Those globals are actually so efficient, the balanced druid healing globals, that we think it's worth to commit those. And you see here we actually have our tank is not going to soak the next one. Our tank is out of the rotation for one here, and we're gonna have our Demon Hunter step up and do one earlier than he normally would, in order to prevent the tank from getting extra stacks. That's actually a strategy a lot of groups use, is they have their Demon Hunter soak more often than everybody else, because you can have 4 people soak, but you can also have 4 people soak and have the Demon Hunter soak like 1 earlier than everybody else and keep moving up by 1 in the rotation every time. And Demon Hunters are really good at that because they take reduced magic damage and they have a bunch of leech, so it makes them the great targets for that to go on. We didn't actually do that though. We stuck to our plan. We stuck to our order. We adjusted it a little bit for my cloak, and we adjusted it a little bit when our tank called for it, but that was all we had to do. So now we're getting towards the very end of the dungeon. We have 13 minutes, but that's not actually very long, even though it's just one boss fight and a little bit of trash. The boss fight takes actually years. It takes one problem with this is if you start Temple of Sethraliss and on like Sunday or later, you might get to server resets before you actually finish that last boss fight, because it takes so long. It's unbelievable, actually, how long the boss fight is. I think it's one of the worst designed boss fights in this expansion. They could just cut one of the phases from it, and it would be so much better. But it would still be the longest fight in the expansion, but it would be so much less tedious, and so much less of this just slog, this brutal slog that requires a lot of off-healing and that kind of annoyance. So now we're doing the eyeball room. The eyeball room, you can actually have somebody hop on the back of a druid. You can see our Demon Hunter is doing it there, and they can click on the ball and the druid won't get slowed. So that's the way we handle this room, is we have that 2-person team do the ball run, and then we have healer, me, and the tank as part of another team that is running interference. The tank is grabbing all the conscripts. I'm available to slow them if needed, but otherwise what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to intercept Orb Guardians and to stop them from getting to our orb running team. And one thing that's true on this right side is that actually up by this tent, up on the right here, there's an Orb Guardian that's in stealth, and my job is to stop that one. That one can often be problematic. If you go around the right side of that pillar, it will interrupt your orb run, which is really brutal. There's not a similar one on the other side. On this left side, there's not actually an Orb Guardian over on the left, so we don't have to worry about that. And I'm just going to break this blind here because we don't want this. Orb Guardians have very weird AI where they won't get in combat with you, but they will still be fixated on you, and it'll persist through threat resets like Vanish and through reses sometimes even. So we really, sometimes they'll just run to your corpse 20 years later and still get in combat with you even if you died and got rezzed afterwards. So our goal here is, now we're doing a death skip. Our goal is for our priest to die, to get battle rezzed into a good spot. There's about a 4-yard radius circle that we want our priest to get to and to get rezzed into. So we did that now, and then everybody else is dying, and we want to wait to make sure that all the Orb Guardians, you can see there, some of them are still running to corpses, like that one up at the front there. Once it runs to the corpse, it's going to reset after it finishes that, and we're just making sure that no Orb Guardians are coming towards us. Once that's done, our priest is going to resurrect, and is going to mass res everybody. So we're checking that, we're saying, okay, we're good, and then there's a very small little spot that she's standing in where she's not going to aggro the mobs from the bridge or the mobs from the boss room. And the reason we don't pull the mobs from the bridge yet is because we want to kill them later. And the way we're going to do that is at the end of this boss fight, you get a huge buff to yourself that's like 95% reduced damage taken, 50% extra haste. So we decided, all right, why don't we kill trash while we have that buff instead of killing trash when we don't have that buff? And that's going to make it more efficient. And that's what we're all about in this group, is just maximizing efficiency. That's how you beat these timers, because otherwise you just have to do so much damage over the course of the Keystone. So we're doing these Hexers 2 at a time. They actually do quite a bit of damage. They do a dispellable flame shock, but of course the more of those you pull, the lower percentage of them you'll actually be able to dispel. And they do an interruptible lava burst, but the more of them you pull, the fewer of those you'll be able to interrupt. So that is why we like to pull these 2 at a time, particularly on weeks like Raging weeks and Fortified weeks. On weeks like that are just pure Tyrannical weeks with no Raging or something, you could maybe do all 4 at once, but there's no reason to do 3 and then 1, for instance. You should either do 2 and 2. You could do 1, 2. You could do 1 at a time as well if you're really scared, but usually you won't have time for that. Usually it's better to pull 2 at a time, but you can also do 4 at a time. But don't do 3 at a time. That's what I'm saying. 3 is bad. 2 or 4. Those are the numbers. Those are the numbers to look for. All right, so the Hexers are dying now, and now we're getting into this last boss fight. And you see we have 9 minutes and 40 seconds on the clock. We need to do the last boss fight, and we need to do the mobs from the bridge. But the mobs from the bridge shouldn't add more than a minute to that. So we've really got about 8 minutes to do this boss fight, and that is a little bit more than we need, but it's not a lot more than we need. Okay. All right, so we got to start this fight by talking to the Avatar. That's how this fight begins. And then we need to make sure that our healer is full mana before this fight starts, because our healer is going to use all the mana that she has, as well as extra mana that she gets from potions and stuff and from innervates, multiple innervates over the course of this fight. The damage priority in this phase is the Heart Guardian. There will be 1 Heart Guardian for phase, and the Heart Guardian is really the only threat to our tank. It stacks a Heart Strike on the tank, and that strike increases the damage that the tank takes for each stack. So it's really important that the Heart Guardian dies fast. Once the Heart Guardian dies, the Hexers can die slower. There's 1 Plague Doctor that spawns right about now, and if you're slow, there will be another Plague Doctor that spawns later if you don't if you don't kill all the Hexers and click the orb fast enough. And that usually happens to us on High Tyrannical. The Plague Doctor does 2 casts: Chain Lightning, which is interruptible and should be interrupted, and Snake Charm, which is not interruptible and can be stunned or something to cause it to recast after the stun, so you can use that to delay the Snake Charm from going out. Snake Charm is just basically a hex. It needs to get dispelled from whoever it goes onto, but you can save healer mana by stopping those from going off, so we recommend doing that if possible. We often will run like Chaos Nova, Fell Eruption, Kidney Shot, Blind, all those sorts of abilities to stop that and delay it for as long as possible. You can see here we've got that second Plague Doctor I was talking about, and you see there Jason, also our tank, just stood in the zap and took a lot of damage from it. All right, now here comes a rain of toads. These toads come during this first intermission. Oh, and you can see actually our healer has pulled the mobs from the bridge, which is really, really bad. I used Vanish so they weren't targeted on me, and then luckily nobody else was in combat with them, so it wasn't a disaster, but that was almost the end of the run right there. I think that was a Halo that pulled them, and luckily we were able to recover, and that didn't end up costing us the run, but it was really, really close, so glad that one worked out. It was really tight though. So yeah, now we're in this intermission. The toads are now going to be a problem for the rest of the fight. They're going to start spawning at increasing intervals. What happens is these 8 toads spawn around the room. They fixate onto the healer and they just start jumping towards them. And what you need to do is you need to stop the toads from getting to the healer. We have Ring of Peace to help facilitate that. We also have stuns, but you can also just run on top of them. And if you run on top of them, they'll explode and you'll get the debuff. And the way the debuff works is that it's a stacking dot, but it also reduces the healing you do by 50%. And that part of it doesn't stack, it's just the damage that stacks. So no matter how many stacks, you're just going to be doing 50% reduced healing. But if that gets on the healer, it's really bad. So it's good if you use abilities like Cloak of Shadows, like I used that first time. And obviously it's not up this time, but I soaked 4, and then I got my poison or my disease cleansed off. And that makes it a lot easier to deal with. So you can either do that or you can kill the frogs, but they're a little bit finicky. They're annoying to target, they're annoying to kill, and they're annoying to group up without actually having them touch the healer. So we like to just kind of run on top of them and deal with them that way and stop them from getting to our healer, because that causes our healer to use more mana if they ever get to her, and we need all the healer mana we can get because this fight takes millions of years. Now we've just got to finish off this Plague Doctor. Once again, this is the second Plague Doctor spawn that happens if you take a long time in one of these phases. There are 3 total of these phases, which is really, really obnoxious. There should be 2. That's my perspective on the game design here. I wish this just didn't take so long, but it does. So we deal with it, and you can see luckily we get multiple innervates over the course of this. And the way this works is that you kill off the Hexers, and then you use the orb that spawns from the Heart Guardian. The orb can actually despawn if you're slow, which sometimes it does to us. But even if it doesn't despawn, and you can see there, our healer actually was using a mana potion and died to a zappy thing there, so we used another one of our B-reses. Luckily, we haven't needed to use very many of them, so we had them to spare. So what happens is the Heart Guardian dies, it drops an orb. The orb despawns after a while, but if you can click on the orb before it despawns, and you should wait until the last possible moment or until all the Hexers dead, then it affects the avatar with a buff. And what it does is the avatar gets this buff that says, anytime I get healed for an extra 1,000 health. And that means that even off healers actually do a really large amount of healing to the avatar while that buff is active. And that's a good way to conserve healer mana. So everybody who has off heals during that phase is using them on the avatar because you get so much benefit. Because the orb gives a flat increase to your healing on them, on the avatar. It's really good news to have off healers in your group, and I really recommend having as many as possible and making sure that all your available off healers do it. You see we're lusting this last set here. This is the last set before we'll have access to the avatar and the big avatar buff, so we use our lust here to help make it easier. And I use my cloak to soak some toads. Now there are going to be toads spawning even in this phase, so it gets a little more hectic, which is fun. I enjoy that. I just wish that the first 2 phases weren't so boring. And that's all there is to this fight. There's not really much more to discuss about it, except for now we're just about to reach the interesting part with the trash, which is how you can see we're only at 90% on enemy forces, so we're gonna need to pull trash. We didn't need to pull it earlier in the fight when we did pull it that one time, but we do need to pull it now that we're at the end of the fight, because once this is over, once we're using the orb there, you can see it channeling on the avatar, so now the avatar is getting a lot of extra healing. Once the avatar is fully healed, we're just blind to that Plague Doctor as well for now, and we'll deal with it once we get this buff. Blind broke because Moonkin dots. But once the avatar comes down, we're going to get a huge buff that makes this way easier. It's actually very good news that I did not die there, because if I did die, even if I got battle res, this is one of those fights where if you are dead when you won't actually get the avatar's buff when she buffs everybody if you're dead at the time. So that's very important. It's kind of like that last boss in Blackrock. I'm not sure if you remember that one, but when people died to that first Shadow Bolt volley, they wouldn't, and even if they got res, they wouldn't have the big buff. But now you can see we're empowered. Our haste is insane. You can look at my energy; it's just going way up all over the place. And now we're just going to pull the whole bridge and kill everything there for a bunch of extra percent. You see our druid is on that mission, grabbing everything from the bridge. We're just killing everything. The only real threat to the tank here is Heart Guardians. They can still actually stack that dot, or the damage increase effect up. If it stacks up to like 20 or something in this phase, he'll start taking damage. But other than that, you can see he's just completely he's tanking so much stuff, and his health is basically not moving. And we're just killing off all this stuff. We still got a cool 2 minutes and 50 seconds left on the timer, and we're gonna defeat this pretty handily. Here, the hard part's now over. This is kind of this is my favorite part of the fight. It's a nice little victory lap when you have this huge buff, this ton of haste and damage reduction, and you can basically stand in whatever, ignore mechanics. It's actually our druid's dream. This is basically our druid's favorite fight, is being able to ignore mechanics and stand and stuff. That's what he does anyway. And that's the end of Temple of Sethraliss. So we beat this with 2 minutes to spare. Pretty good time, and that is the world first 18 Tyrannical Temple done by us. So pretty cool, and that's the route we used to do it. A couple cool skips that we did there, and a couple of innovative ways to handle different mechanics and that hard boss fight, and that's how we defeated this timer. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, maybe throw me a subscribe. Watch some of my other videos. I've got affix guides, I've got guide to the rogue class, I've got other dungeon guides that are in a similar style to this one. I bet you'd enjoy them if you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you hopefully in one of those.